So, I am now 32 years young, and some of you guys, for you, that seems like, oh man, he's unk status, he's old, right? But believe it or not, you'll be my age very, very soon. And I feel like the older you get, kind of the more like regrets in life you have. You know what I'm saying? Now for me, some of my regrets in life are things like, I actually wish that I learned Korean better. Because like when I was growing up, my mom would send me to Korean school every Saturday, but I protested against it, and my Korean level is at like the same level as like a 3-year-old or like a 4-year-old in Korea. It's really bad. It's just conversational and just enough. I also wish that I learned piano better, just because I took piano lessons for nearly 14 years, but I still can't really play the right hand and the left hand together. So it's really, really rough. I can't sight read particularly well. It's just like a useful skill to have. I could talk to more people, if I was better at Korean, and certainly I could play more on the piano as well if I learned piano better. What about for you? What are some regrets that you had or wish that you learned things better now that you're a little bit older? Does anything come to mind for you guys? What do you guys think? What's something that you wish that you learned or someone taught you better? What do you guys think?
I wish I had never played Valorant.
Okay, so you wish that nobody ever showed you Valorant in the first place. Valid. Okay, fair enough. What about everyone else? What is like a regret that you wish that you learned something better or someone had taught you better in a certain way? Anything else come to mind? Yeah, go ahead, Josh.
Well, half my family's Portuguese, but I didn't learn it very well because my mom and dad were divorced. So
Okay.
I wish I could have learned Portuguese better. I would have had a second language that would have been kind of nice to have.
Yeah, so maybe learning a foreign language like Portuguese, for example. All right, what about you guys over here on this side? What is like a regret where you wish you learned something better or someone taught you better in a certain way?
Same with Tagalog.
Tagalog? Oh, because you're half Filipino, right, Alex? Okay, fair enough. Oh, you guys, are you full Filipino? Just you're half as well?
We're the same amount of Filipino, and it's kind of like, no, we're not.
Well, interesting.
Okay, for sure. Anyone else on this side? Do you guys have a regret where you wish you learned something better or someone taught you better in any way?
Should learn Tagalog too.
All right. So lesson for all the younger people, if you're still in Chinese class or whatever, learn it better. So one thing that I wish that I learned better, actually, on top of Korean and top of piano, is I wish that someone had taught me more about sexuality and more about manhood and about womanhood according to the Bible. Because I don't know about you, but nowadays, genuinely speaking, it doesn't seem like parents are parenting their children. And I think that's where a lot of our understanding of sexuality should come from, right? From our parents, our moms or dads, who should sit down with us, not just, maybe you had a birds and the bees talk before, like maybe once in your life, but how often did your dad or did your mom sit down with you and talk to you about what womanhood is or what manhood is? Probably very, very limitedly. One of my pet peeves, one of my greatest pet peeves that I have is, and I see this all the time nowadays, is parents will sit down with their children, like when they're eating out or whatever, and everybody's on their phone. Mom's on their phone, dad's on their phone, kids on their iPad. The other day I saw a dad just hold up an iPhone for their child. And they're just watching I think they were watching like Kim Kardashian or something. And this is like a 6-year-old. I was like, bro, that is crazy. But nowadays, it seems like we're kind of outsourcing teaching to other people or just the internet or society or schools or teachers at our school rather than parenting ourselves. And I think in one of the biggest areas we're seeing that is in sexuality. Quite frankly, I think that we live in a very sexually confused world and a very sexually confused culture where people, first of all, nowadays, if you try to tell a person to define what a man is or what a woman is, people don't know. And if you tell them about what manhood is or about what womanhood is, they also don't know. So I think we live in a very, very sexually confused, gender confused world. And in spite of all of that, what we're going to see here in Matthew 19 is that scripture is very clear on what a man is, on what a woman is, on what sexuality should look like. And that's exactly what we're going to see for the teaching of Jesus here in Matthew 19. So let's go to read it together and we'll break it down in a couple ways. Starting in Matthew 19, verse 1 through 12. Let's read it together. And when Jesus had finished these sayings, he went away from Galilee and entered the region of Judea beyond the Jordan. And large crowds followed him, and he healed them there. And Pharisees came up to him and tested him by asking, "Is it lawful to divorce one's wife for any cause?" He answered, "Have you not read that he who created them from the beginning made them male and female, and said, 'Therefore a man shall leave his father and his mother and hold fast to his wife, and the two shall become one flesh'? So they are no longer two, but one flesh. What therefore God has joined together, let not man separate. They said to him, why then did Moses command one to give a certificate of divorce and to send her away? He said to them, because of your hardness of heart, Moses allowed you to divorce your wives, but from the beginning it was not so. And I say to you, whoever divorces his wife, except for sexual immorality, and marries another, commits adultery. The disciples said to him, if such is the case of a man with his wife, it is better not to marry. But he said to them, not everyone can receive this saying, but only to those whom it is given. For there are eunuchs who have been so from birth, and there are eunuchs who have been made eunuchs by men, and there are eunuchs who have made themselves eunuchs for the sake of the kingdom of heaven. Let the one who is able to receive this, receive it. All right, very good. So we're going to focus on one very simple verse here that Jesus says, okay? So what's happening here is that the Pharisees are coming up to him, and they're trying to trip up Jesus, right? And particularly on the topic of divorce and about marriage. So they ask him, hey, is it lawful to divorce one's wife for any cause? What they're talking about, what they're referencing is actually Deuteronomy chapter 24, where Moses outlines basically how to divorce your wife. And he answers, have you not read in verse 4 rather? He who created them from the beginning made them male and female. What Jesus is doing actually is he's quoting Genesis 1, where it's very clear that God made us in our image, and that when God created man, he made us male and female. So what I'm seeing from this verse is kind of, as I mentioned at the beginning, we live in an era of gender confusion and gender dysphoria. This statement that God made man male and female, if you said that today in any of your schools or any of your colleges, people would get up in arms and say, what are you talking about? We are not male and female. We're on a spectrum. We can kind of be whatever we want. Sometimes we can be male. Sometimes we can be female. I can identify as a female. I can identify as a male. It doesn't matter what you identify as. There is no such thing as being a man or being a woman. We live in an extremely gender confused world. And the thing is, all of us, I will say, have been brainwashed to some extent. Because whether it's school or your professors or your TV shows that you watch today or movies or advertisements or newspapers or articles or websites, administrators, the world and society are deeply lost when it comes to understanding of sex, gender, and identity. I mentioned this before, but there's a kindergarten class that was in the news recently where the teacher gave everyone name tags, right? But on the name tags, you can decide how much of a boy you want to be today or how much of a girl. And you just kind of slid along your name tag if you want to be a boy or if you want to be a girl. Dude, if you did that when I was growing up, like, I don't know, 25 years ago, like, you would literally be arrested. Like there's just no question about it. Like, that teacher would not be there any longer. But we live in a culture where it just seems so normal, where, oh, that's fine. Yeah, if your kid comes out and says, I think I'm a boy or I think I'm a girl, you know what, just go with it. And the thing is, if you don't support that idea, if you're not inclusive in that way, you're labeled as a bigot, you're labeled as a transphobe, they call you homophobic, and all these other slurs to basically discount your view in any way. It's crazy. It's dysphoria. And nowadays, it's not just saying, oh, I identify as a boy or I identify as a girl, but nowadays there's gender affirming care, which is really just mutilation, where you are encouraged to block your hormones, you're encouraged to take testosterone or take more estrogen, you're encouraged to even chop off body parts, where you could literally chop off your breast or even chop off your penis because you think that you're of another gender. Which is insane if you think about it, right? Like, we don't allow people to even get tattoos until they're 18 years old. But you know what? Chop off your breast or chop off your penis, no problem. As long as you think you are the other gender, it's fine. And yet here, Jesus is very, very clear that there is a standard on what is a male and what is a female. That there is a difference between what is a male and what is a female. If you have a child who believes that they are Superman, and that they can jump off buildings and not get hurt, would you allow them to just start jumping off buildings? I hope not. If you, as a child, even believe or even say out loud, I think I'm a boy or I think I'm a girl, when really they're the opposite gender, should you say, okay, you know what, let's just start chopping body pieces off? I don't think that we should. And yet the culture that we live in today, that's exactly what we have. You know, Gavin Newsom recently passed a bill just a couple months ago where if you come out to a teacher saying that, oh, I think I'm a boy, I think I'm a girl, when you're really the opposite, they're not even obligated to tell your parents anymore. So nowadays, teachers are actually hiding gender identity from parents in an attempt to promote, accepting everybody as they are, which is insane to me. Matt Walsh, who's a famous conservative and political commentator, simply states, when he argues with people about this issue, he goes up to people and he asks, what is a man or what is a woman? And it's scary because nobody seems to be able to define that these days. Do you know what a man is? Do you know what a woman is? What do you guys think? Does anyone have a good definition of that? What is a man? Yeah.
Like you're born with a specific sex organ.
Okay, so you got specific sex organs?
I guess like there are some like extremely rare cases where like some people they have like a mix of both, but really that's a genetic like deformed body. Like it's not supposed to be like that.
It's like an anomaly, right? Like people are sometimes born without arms or legs.
And, like, even in those rare cases, like they usually like one of those sex organs just doesn't work. So like you can consider them like the gender of the ones that are working, you know?
Yeah. So it's sex organs, and at the end of the day, it's chromosomes, right? So men have XX or XY chromosomes, and females only have XX chromosomes. That's how it works. It's kind of crazy because if you kind of think about human history for a second, right? Just think of human history on a spectrum. And if you look back literally the past 6,000, 7,000 plus years, this idea that men were created to be men and females were created to be females has stood true. And then literally, I kid you not, in the past 15 to 20 years, we're like, you know what? That doesn't exist anymore. It's absolutely insane. And yet that's exactly what's happening today. And you know what's scary about this experiment? What's scary once we start this idea that, hey, transgenderism is fine and having these thoughts is fine and transitioning is fine, the statistics are what's really scary. So for example, did you know that 82% of transgender individuals have considered killing themselves? 82%, which is insanely high. And do you know that nearly 50% of transgender people have attempted suicide at one point? On top of that, do you know that you are 800% more likely to commit suicide if you consider yourself to be transgender? That's an issue. That's a problem. And what we're doing, rather than fighting against this issue and this problem, is trying to affirm it and say this is fine and this is okay. However, Scripture, God, and Jesus are all incredibly clear that mankind is made male and female and that you are assigned this sex and this gender at birth. In Genesis 1:27, it says very clearly, God created man in his own image. In the image of God, he created them. Male and female, he created them. There's a difference, and you are assigned this at birth. In Deuteronomy 22:5, one of the commands for the people for the Israelites were, a woman shall not wear a man's garment, nor shall a man put on a woman's cloak. For whoever does these things is an abomination to the Lord your God. So even in Deuteronomy, we're saying, hey, there are clothes that men are to wear. There are clothes that women are to wear. And if you decide you're going to switch, that's an abomination to God. And that's not true just in Deuteronomy, but all throughout Scripture. In Matthew 19:4, Jesus is now saying through us here in this verse, have you not read that he who created them from the beginning made them male and female? So I'll give you a definition of male just so you have it, because I know that we live in a very confused world, and you might know what makes a man a man. So let me give it to you. So a male is a person with XY chromosomes whose gametes, sex organs, produce sperm and who has a penis. That's how you define a man. It's someone who has XY chromosomes, they produce sperm, and they have a penis. And their secondary characteristics include things like a deeper voice, facial and body hair, greater average muscle mass, and body and bone density as a whole. Those are the characteristics typical of a man. What's a female then? It's a person with XX chromosomes whose gametes produce eggs. That's what women do. They produce eggs, and who has a vagina, and whose secondary characteristics include breast development, wider hips, and a menstrual cycle. That's what a woman is. And we've known this literally since the dawn of time. But now in the past 15 to 20 years, we said, you know what, we're going to do away with all of that. In fact, in Genesis 3:16, God, when he curses Eve because of her sin, says this. To the woman he said, I will surely multiply your pain in childbearing. In pain shall you bring forth children. A woman is potentially able to bring forth children. If you don't have the potential to bring forth children, are you a woman, no matter how many pronouns you use or how many body parts you attach to yourself? You are not. You are not. If you do not have the biological equipment to potentially bear children, you are a woman. It's it's really quite simple. To put this in an analogy, if I had a son who was 10 years old who insisted that they are actually a mouse and wanted to live in between the walls and eat only cheese all day and hang out with other mice and even make mice babies. If he came out to me at 10 years old and said this, first of all, I would not affirm that decision for him to be a mouse. I just wouldn't. Because I'd say, son, that's impossible. You are a son. You are my son. You are a dude. You are not a mouse. And I wouldn't be helping him get a tail on him to help him become more of a mouse. That just doesn't make sense. That'd be insanity. And yet, that's exactly what people, parents, and even celebrities are insisting on doing today. I'm sorry, but I will not affirm your delusion, and I cannot promote lies. That's what it is. At the end of the day, it's delusions and it's lies. Fundamentally, God has made men and women different. They are equal in value and worth and dignity. Both of them are made in the image of God, but they are simply different. So do Christians believe that men are superior to women? No. Do Christians believe that women are superior to men? No. All are equal before God. We just have different roles. In a company, some of you guys work for companies now, you have a CEO, your chief executive officer, and then you also have a COO, a chief operating officer. Both are really, really important to the company, right? The CEO kind of manages the day-to-day. The CEO kind of casts the vision and manages the whole company as a whole. Are both of them essential? Yes. Are both of them equally important? Yes, they are. That's how it's kind of like between men and women as well. In general, did you know that men and women actually have quite a few differences? Physically speaking, and I looked up some of these things, and it's kind of crazy how different we are. Men have more skeletal muscle, especially upper body strength. Would anyone care to venture how much more on average men have in terms of upper body strength compared to women?
Probably like 200%.
not that high. Not high. On average, maybe some of you guys who work out a lot, yeah. On average, it's 50%. The average guy has 50% more upper body stuff going on, upper body strength than women. Men have higher testosterone levels, and it promotes muscle growth and aggression, while women have higher estrogen and progesterone levels, influencing reproductive functions and emotional regulation. Do you even know that men have actually larger lung capacity than women by 12%? That's just natural. We're just born with that. So that we could do stuff to hold our breath more, I guess. Did you know that on average, men are taller than women by about 5 to 6 inches in most cultures?
Dang it, no.
On average. For sure. Also, though, men don't have all the advantages. Do you know men are more likely to engage in risk-taking behaviors, aka extreme sports or financial gambles, because they have more testosterone, while women tend to be more risk-averse. And so did you also know that women are most likely to outlive men by 5 to 7 years? So I do financial planning. That's my job. That's my day job as a financial advisor. And literally, I calculate men living to age 92. Women live to about 99 nowadays, which is kind of crazy. So we calculate out, and it's a difference of 7 years because women are just more likely to not take as many risks. So you kind of get these advantages and disadvantages, right? Did you know men have greater grip strength, about 20 to 30% stronger due to higher muscle mass in the upper body? Men, on average, are stronger in mental rotation, map navigation, and spatial reasoning, while women are stronger in verbal fluency, reading comprehension, and recognizing emotion in speech or faces. Women outperform men in episodic memory and tasks requiring multitasking. So, for whatever reason, women seem to be just better multitaskers, whereas men excel in focused attention on single tasks. Women tend to use language to build connection, focus on relationships, and express feelings, while men tend to use language for information exchange or problem solving and are often more direct. So there's a lot of differences. There's a lot of differences. And the thing is, we should appreciate these differences and recognize these differences rather than denying them altogether. In the context of marriage, we learn through Scripture that men were made to lead, love, provide for, protect women and their family, while women were made to help, be an ally to, submit, respect, and care for their family. So here's the thing. Sometimes, people say something funny. They say, oh, if Jesus were alive today, he'd be hanging out with all the transgender folks and just loving them and just having a good time, and he'd be so accepting because Jesus hung around prostitutes and drunkards and homeless people and poor, and he really cared for them. But here's the thing. Jesus is not as tolerant as you think, because although Jesus loved prostitutes, tax collectors, drunkards, and sinners, don't be mistaken, he never ever affirmed their sinful behavior as okay. It's not like, he was hanging out with the drunkards and it was making more water into wine so that they can get more drunk. That'd be a little bit crazy, right? Like, that just wasn't happening. When the prostitute came to Jesus' feet and anointed his feet with that fancy ointment and that perfume, it's not like Jesus was like, okay, go in peace and prostitute yourself out some more. Like, that just didn't happen, right? Although Jesus loved tax collectors, he didn't encourage the tax collectors to go then and continue to rip people off. So yes, it is true that Jesus would care for tax collectors and sinners. But he would say things like in Luke 13:3, where when a building fell on a bunch of people, he said, unless you repent, you will all likewise perish. And then he told the disabled man, the invalid, in John 5, who had been disabled for 38 years, see, you are well, sin no more, that nothing worse may happen to you. So yes, Jesus loved sinners. Jesus loved people who had a severe misunderstanding about what it is to follow God and to obey God and to love God and to be a disciple. However, he didn't let them stay in their delusion or in their sin or in their evil. It's the exact same way that you and I are encouraged to engage with those who have very, very confused beliefs about sex and gender and sexuality as a whole, right? We're to love them, absolutely, and we should hang around them. We shouldn't think that we're better than them, but at the same time, Jesus wouldn't tolerate sin, and neither should you and I. And so when people deny basic things like male and female, when people deny basic things that, hey, men and women are different and we have different roles, I think that's when we have to stand up for the truth and say, hey, you know what? You may think that, but I don't. And this is what Scripture says. This is what Jesus says. And here it's very, very clear that God made people male and female, and there's a difference between the two. The third point that I want to talk about is that what God has joined together, let not man separate. So in verse 5-9 it says this. It said, therefore a man shall leave his father and his mother and hold fast to his wife, and the two shall become one flesh. So they are no longer two, but one flesh. What therefore God has joined together, let not man separate. They said to them, why then did Moses command one to give a certificate of divorce and to send her away? He said to them, because of your hardness of heart, Moses allowed you to divorce your wives, but from the beginning it was not so. And I say to you, whoever divorces his wife except for sexual immorality and marries another commits adultery. So what are we seeing here? So this is kind of the big topic, right? This is the topic of divorce, and we're talking about marriage here as well. And as I stated earlier, in Deuteronomy 24, Moses did allow people to divorce. So that's what they're quoting. However, what Jesus clarifies is God's intent when it came to marriage was that they would never separate and that they would never divorce. That's what he's saying. So what you and I see here is that marriage is a sacred union where a man leaves his father and his mother, holds fast to his wife, and the two become one flesh. Jesus there is quoting Genesis 2:24 almost word for word. So I want you to see a couple things. First off, so you're kind of wondering, hey, how is this relevant to me? Like, I'm not even married, and I'm not even thinking about divorce, but how's it relevant? Well, I think it's very, very relevant because it's all about manhood, it's about womanhood, and eventually all of us want to get married, right? Is there a single person here that thinks that they're celibate? Yeah, I didn't think so, right? So it's good to learn about things before they happen rather than letting it happen and be like, oh, what is it that I learned that one time? Oh, I forgot it all, right? So here's the thing. One of the first things that we see here in this passage is that a man must have the ability to leave his father and mother and grow up in order to have a wife in the first place. How do I know this? Well, here in this verse, it says, a man shall leave his father and his mother and hold fast to his wife, and the two shall become one flesh. So some of you guys are getting that age where you want to start dating, you want to become boyfriend, girlfriend, and you want to you're even thinking about marriage, right? And here's what Jesus would say to you. Before you can even do that, first of all, can you leave your father and mother, and would you be able to hold fast to your wife? And so what this means practically is independence, where you're self-sustaining, where you're mature enough, and you're able to be a leader. There's a there's actually a song that came out recently by Tanashi. It's very catchy. It's called "No Broke Boys," and so some of the lyrics goes like this: "No broke boys, no new friends. I'm that pressure. Give me my tens. Tens isn't like 10 out of 10, guys." It said, "No broke boys, ain't no shade. F word on me, then you know he paid." And so what she's saying is, what she's saying in the verse is, what she wants, and this is obviously someone who isn't Christian, right? She wants somebody that's going to be able to take care of her. She wants someone that's wealthy enough to be able to look after her, to care for her, to provide for her family, etc. And her whole line is, "No broke boys." Right? But here's the thing. Some of you guys are broke boys, let's be real. Right? And you're like, "Oh, dude, I can't wait until I have a girlfriend. I can't wait until I have a wife." But let me tell you, just for, like, if you take the perspective of a female, right, and you look at your life and you're broke and you can hardly take care of yourself, how is it that you're going to take care of her? You know what I'm saying? So Jesus actually teaches us about masculinity here, and the first thing that he's teaching us is, hey, if you really want to measure yourself and see whether or not you're a mature man, can you take care of yourself? Are you mature enough to take care of yourself? Are you self-sustaining? Because if you're living in your mom's basement right now, or if you're living in your mom or dad's house right now, and you get free rent, you get free Wi-Fi, you get free food, your mom and dad still do your laundry and all these things, they still take care of you in all these ways, are you ready for a relationship? No, you're not. You're not. Okay, I'm sorry, but you're not. And what's crazy is, now more than ever, people are actually staying at home longer with their parents than ever before. In the 1970s, only 9% of men and 6% of women ages 25 to 34 were living at home with their parents. So if you're age 25 to 34, there's only 9% of men that were doing that, 6% of women. By 2020, guess what the numbers are now? 22% of men and 13% of women ages 25 to 34 were living at home with their parents. So nearly 200% increase for men, and about double for women, about 100% increase. Did you know, back in the 1970s, the average age to get married was 23 and 22 for men and women respectively. So when you got to about 23 years old, you got married. When you're about 22 as a woman, you got married. Nowadays, the median age in 2024 has risen to 30 for men and 29 for women. So what's happening? What's happening is people are staying at home longer. They are not able to leave their father and mother's house to go and be with their wife or their spouse. And on top of that, they're getting married much, much later in life as well. People are growing up a lot slower. And unfortunately, you and I are part of that generation. And you know people like this. I mean, imagine some of your friends married right now. How would that go for them? Like, that'd just be disaster, right? Like,
It already is. It already is.
It already is. Yeah, it already is. Yeah. I mean, it would just be bad,
About
right?
it all the time.
Sure. And here's the thing. For yourself as well, if you really want to measure, hey, am I a mature man, or am I even a mature woman, and am I ready to have someone else take care of me, or am I ready to take care of someone else? That's a very simple measure of manhood, because that's what a man was back then. It's someone who was self-sustaining, who was mature, and able to lead and provide for their own family. That's what it is. That's what it always has been. But then now we have this idea of extended adolescence, where you can be in your late 20s, late 30s, and just be in perpetual adolescence your entire life. And here Jesus is teaching us about manhood and saying, listen, it's about growing up. It's about maturing. It's about leaving your father and mother and then cleaving to your wife. You know what's sad? I kind of mentioned at the beginning that I wish I was taught this earlier. You know that today, for most people, one in 4 households grow up without a father figure. 1 in 4 in America. That's really, really high. In certain races, like the African American community, it's actually even much higher than that, which is really, really sad. And so you and I kind of grow up not having fathers in the house. And I don't know how good your relationship is with your father. We have a lot of guys here, so I'm just talking mostly to the guys. But the thing is, like, did your dad ever really sit down with you and teach you, hey, this is what it means to be a man. This is what it means to grow up, and this is what it looks like to grow up. This is what it means to take responsibility. This is what it means to be mature. Most haven't, even if they have dads that aren't absent, which is really, really sad. In Lamentations 3:27, we learn, it is good for a man that he bear the yoke in his youth. I remember that, so for those of you guys who don't know my story, so I got married right out of high school. Like, literally, I graduated in May, and I got married in June. Like, that's how I got married. And immediately, I realized, okay, I need to care for this other person. I need to provide for this other person. We need food, water, clothing, shelter, medicine. We need to have a life, right? We need to be able to enjoy this life. We don't want to just have life and be living on the streets, but we want to have a decent life. And I was just like, bro, there's a lot of things that I have to do, and now there's responsibilities on my shoulders. That's what Lamentations 3:27 is saying. It is good for a man that he bear the yoke in his youth. You just grow up a whole lot faster if you just got more responsibilities. The problem is, a lot of men today don't want responsibilities. They don't want to grow up. They don't want to leave mother and father, like Jesus is suggesting here, to hold fast to his wife and become one flesh. Another thing that I want you to see here as well is that it is a sacred union where two, a man and a woman, become one. So this is a teaching that is directly opposite to what our society teaches today. Our society teaches us today that sex is actually not sacred. That sex is actually just commonplace, that sex doesn't matter. So sleep with whoever you want. Here, Jesus is saying something different. He's saying sex is sacred, marriage is sacred, and that marriage is a holy union where two become one. The Bible, God and Jesus, does not approve of divorce because marriage is a sacred covenant and a union. Sometimes, rather than viewing it as a covenant, we view it as a business relationship, right? So a business relationship is, I agree to provide this, you agree to provide that. And if at any point one does not accommodate and accomplish what we agreed on in the contract, then that contract is null and void, and then we're free to divorce. That's a business agreement. When the Bible speaks of marriage, it is not a business contract, but rather a spiritual covenant. Where God says things like, I will never leave you, I will forsake you. That's a covenant rather than a contract. That's why in vows, for example, have you guys ever been to a wedding before and witnessed a vow before? Okay, cool. So I have as well. And vows typically go like this, right? I, Aaron, take thee, whoever, to be my wedded wife or husband, to have and to hold from this day forward, for richer, for poorer, for better, for worse, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish till death do us part. So in that vow, what is the only thing that can break marriage? Death. Is that how people view marriage today? No. They're like, hey, you know what? It doesn't matter. I don't like you anymore. You don't look pretty anymore. You don't look good anymore. You haven't been taking care of your body anymore. You don't make me happy anymore. Goodbye. They just leave. I don't see anyone dying, and yet that's what's happening, right? I remember seeing this actually live. So I was the best man at my brother's wedding, and I remember seeing. So I even gave up and gave like a best man speech and everything. But I remember being at their wedding as they were like reciting these vows. I'm like, okay, they're gonna be husband and wife forever, and that's what I was thinking in my head. Fast forward 6-7 years, and they're divorced. I'm like, bro, like, why did you waste a bunch of money on this marriage? Why did you get 200, 300 of your best friends and college friends and family members, everyone together to have the solemn vow if you're just going to break it? Like, what's the point? No one seems to be taking that commitment seriously anymore. It's a covenant where you say to your spouse, the only thing that will separate us is death. And obviously, you don't go and try to kill your partner or anything, right? But that's the only thing that can occur for that marriage to separate. And that's how Christians are to think about marriage as well, where it's a sacred union. Two have become one. Now, I don't know if you've ever experienced this before. Probably haven't, right? None of us have ever been conjoined twins before, right? But imagine that you're a conjoined twin and you want to separate something that is one flesh. And you're like, hey, you know what? I have this conjoined twin, they're attached to me, but I'm going to go ahead and separate them. What would happen if you did that?
Lots of pain.
Lots of pain, right? And most likely death. And so that's why divorce feels like that oftentimes, isn't it? It's because two are literally one is rather being ripped apart to two. That's really fundamentally what's happening. And God never intended that to happen. So here's the thing. How do you and I avoid divorce? I want to give you some practical steps. Because obviously we see this command not to divorce, but how do you and I practically avoid divorce? First of all, marry a godly Christian spouse. So the very first step that you should take into consideration if you want to avoid divorce is marry a godly Christian spouse. Someone that loves Jesus, follows Jesus, obeys Jesus, is growing in Jesus. part of the church, loves the church, serves the church, listens to the word, obeys the word, and is actually a Christian. Why? Because if you marry a Christian, they will have read Matthew 19, where Jesus says, do not divorce, and they'll take that very seriously. That's the first thing, right? It seems very practical, right? 2 Corinthians 6 is kind of the big Bible passage on this, where it says, hey, listen, do not marry unbelievers. And the reason why you don't marry unbelievers is because you are so different from an unbeliever. You are in the light. Unbelievers are in darkness. You are of God. They are of Satan. What accord does Belial have with Christ? Nothing. The thing is, if you marry somebody who is an unbeliever, what's going to happen to you is the exact same thing that happened to the Israelites. In the Old Testament, the Israelites are told constantly, again and again, do not marry outsiders. Why? What happens when they marry outsiders? All of a sudden, they start worshiping their idols. And all of a sudden, they start deviating away from God altogether and abandoning God altogether. That's what happens. Second advice, how to avoid divorce, marry somebody that you'll enjoy for the rest of your life. So, it kind of sounds like really simple, right? Like, oh, duh, obviously, yeah, of course I'll marry someone I enjoy. There are people that literally are at the altar and they know they don't like this other person. And they know that they'll grow sick of that other person in 2 years, 3 years, but they're like, you know what? Might as well do it. Let's just, roll the dice and see how it works out. That's insane. For me, I seriously considered celibacy back when I was in high school. Like I said, I wasn't celibate very long, right? I got married at 18. But I seriously considered celibacy when I was 16, 17, 18 years old, because I looked around at all the other women that I knew in my life, and I was just like, holy smokes, I would be so miserable with you. Like, every day I would wake up and literally like just hurt myself if I was going to be with you. Like, that's how I genuinely felt. Because I was like, dude, like, you're annoying, you're irresponsible, like, we wouldn't get along, you'd nag me, you'd complain, you'd do all these different things. And I'm like, bro, this would be terrible. And that's what I genuinely thought. So I'm like, the Lord is calling me to celibacy. Because I'm looking around at all these women, I'm like, this is terrible. This is absolutely terrible.
I agree with you.
Okay. And then I came across Lynn. I'm like, okay, I could see myself spending the rest of my life with her. Because I really enjoy every moment that I have with her, and I don't want this to stop. That's how it should feel when you meet that spouse that is meant for you. It's someone that you want to spend the rest of your life with. J.A. Packer has a quote, and he says, the Puritan ethic of marriage was first to not look for a partner whom you do love passionately at this moment, but rather for one whom you can love steadily as your best friend for life, then to proceed with God's help to do just that. So, some people marry out of great passion because they see another person, like, oh man, they're so good looking, they're so beautiful, or oh, they kind of have these exterior things that are nice about them. But then the Puritan ethic of marriage was to marry your best friend and to cultivate that friendship for all of life and to proceed with God's help to do just that. I think that's a beautiful way of thinking about marriage. If you marry your best friend, you're going to have a good time. If you marry someone that you can barely tolerate but looks pretty or looks handsome, I'm going to tell you you're going to have a very miserable time. Okay? So marry your best friend. It's a good idea. Third, how to avoid divorce. Learn to be a good forgiver. Okay? Learn to be a good forgiver. So, sometimes people ask me, hey, could you ever forgive Lynn if she committed adultery? Because in verse 9, right? In verse 9, Jesus actually gives an exception clause and says, don't divorce except in what? In verse 9 it says, and I say to you, whoever divorces his wife except for sexual immorality and marries another commits adultery. So people ask me sometimes, hey, Aaron, like if Lynn committed adultery, would you divorce her? This verse is not meant to be like an ejection seat. And what I mean by that is, as soon as like your spouse commits adultery, it isn't like, hit the ejection seat, blast them off your life. Like, that's not how it works, okay? In fact, in the Bible, there's a whole book, in the book of Hosea, God has Hosea, this prophet, marry a prostitute named Gomer. And the whole reason why God had Hosea marry this prostitute is so that Hosea could feel what God felt about the Israelites. That the Israelites were like a bunch of prostitutes prostituting themselves away from their faithful husband, God. And God wanted Hosea to feel that. And yet God is still faithful, right? As soon as we sin, does God hit the ejection seat with us? Like, all right, see you later, straight to hell. Like, is that what happens as us as Christians? Like, no, that's not what happens, right? So why would we do that in marriage, right? It's not like as soon as your spouse commits adultery, it's like, I'll see you later, goodbye forever. No. 2 weeks ago, we learned about the parable of the unforgiving servant, right? And we learned that forgiveness, we're able to forgive other people of all sorts of evil against us, even great evils, because we have been forgiven of much more by God himself, right? Recently, Erica Kirk got up during Charlie Kirk's memorial speech, and she forgave Charlie Kirk's assassin in front of literally millions of people. And some people were like, how could she possibly do that? Forgive her husband's assassin? That'd be insane. And yet she did. Why? What gave her the strength to be able to do that? Because she knows how much she's been forgiven by Jesus Christ. And because that's exactly what Jesus had to do, to forgive and also love our enemies, no? And so that's the thing. I think you have to learn to be a good forgiver. Because, and it's not just adultery that we should potentially be able to forgive, but it's when our spouse is forgetful, or people don't spend enough time together, or if your spouse gets you a bad gift, or if they're selfish, or if they have poor communication, or if you feel like you're not understood, if you got financial problems or family problems, or you're growing apart, etc. Like, the thing is, we're called to forgive all sorts of things against our potential spouse. And so we need to go and have both eyes wide open going to marriage, understanding that marriage is a union between two sinners. And that's really, really tough. If you've ever had to live with a roommate before, you know how tough that can be at times, right? You're like, oh my gosh, like I have to accommodate this person so much. Here's the thing. If you really want to be sanctified, I would say get married. Because once you start living with another person, you just find out how selfish and sinful you really are. And you find out how much you need to forgive, and also at the same time, how much you need to be forgiven of. So point 4 is actually learn to be a good repenter. Not only forgive a lot, but you also need to say sorry a lot. Like, if I counted the amount of times that I said sorry to Lynn, like, I would just lose count. I'm saying, like, I say sorry a lot because I mess up a lot. But here's the thing. In marriages that end in divorce, you know what ends up happening? A lot of the times, somebody stops saying sorry. And as a result of stop saying sorry, then their relationship crumbles as a result, and they can't get past that brokenness. But sorry allows you to reconcile. Sorry allows you to get past things. So in your life right now, and some of you are like, dude, this is like great advice, but I'm probably not going to get married for 30 years or something. Like, here's the thing. Like, you start now. You really start now. Do you have a hard time forgiving people in your life right now? I'll tell you, if that continues, you might be in for a really rough marriage in the future. Because your spouse is going to sin against you a lot. No matter how perfect your spouse is, like, everyone kind of goes through like a honeymoon phase, right? That's why they call it a honeymoon phase. It's like the first 2 years or 3 years are really, really nice, and then like Armageddon hits you, right? Like, the thing is, like, everyone's going to go through that phase where, hey, that sparkle isn't quite there anymore, right? And reality kind of sits in. That's what's going to happen. Number 5, don't see divorce as an option, okay? This is very practical. Jesus here says something very, very simple, right? What therefore, in verse 6, God has joined together, let not man separate. So if we see it as an option, we might take it, right? We might take it. But if it's not there, then it's all good. It's like on a multiple choice test. If you're given 4 options, you might pick one of 4. But if it's not even there, then you're not going to pick it. There's no chance that you can pick it, right? So some people, when they get into fights and arguments with their spouse, they're like, oh, dude, what should I do? Like, I can leave them. I can run away. Like, I can hurt them. Like, I can forgive them. Like, what can I do? And then they also list divorce as one of the options too. Oh, I could divorce them. For us as believers, it's not an option. So don't even tolerate that idea. Don't even think of that idea, because it's not an option. It's really quite simple. You work out your problems. That's just what you do. So number 6, work out your problems and talk things through and get help if needed. One of the most practical tips I would say is don't let the sun go down your anger. That's something that Paul urges us to do in the book of Ephesians, I believe, where he says, listen, if you fight, if you argue, that's fine, but don't let that fester. But forgive and reconcile to one another very quickly. Number 7, don't just prepare for a wedding day, but prepare for a marriage with wise counsel, guidance and discipleship, etc. What I mean by this is unbelievers spend an inordinate amount of money on a wedding day, on just one day. So they'll spend like $40,000 on their actual wedding day. They'll spend like 10, 20 grand on like a wedding ring. They'll spend like another 10K on like photography and all this other stuff. And they'll spend like nearly like 100 grand after all things being said on just one day. That's a crazy party, right? But that's a lot of money, that's a lot of effort. And what they'll do is You ever heard of like Bridezilla, where like the bride will kind of go crazy with all the planning, all the thinking, all the designing of the actual wedding? People do that all for one day, but they don't do any planning after that one day. They're like, let's have this gigantic party. Oh yeah, and then I have to be wed to you after that. Like that, kind of like the marriage feels like an afterthought rather than the main thought. Whereas they kind of make the wedding the biggest deal and marriage the smallest deal. It should be the exact opposite. If anything, have like a cheap wedding at like Taco Bell and do a lot of planning and a lot of thinking, a lot of meditating on how you're going to make the marriage work. Genuinely speaking, if you put 20, 30, 40 grand doing discipleship and teaching, Bible reading into like having a healthy marriage, like, dude, you might have the best marriage ever, genuinely speaking. But people don't do that, right? They're like, I'm going to spend 50 grand, 60 grand on a wedding and then spend no money, no effort, no planning, no thinking, no reading, no meditation, no learning on how to actually have a good marriage. Isn't that a little bit broken? And yet that's what people are doing. That's what people are doing. Number 8, don't put yourself in a situation to commit adultery in the first place ever. So here's the thing. It's really hard to commit adultery, one of the exceptions that Jesus gives to this rule to divorce, if you are never in a room alone with somebody else of the opposite sex. This is what's famously known as the Billy Graham rule. So Billy Graham was a famous preacher, famous evangelist, and he had a rule where he would never ever be alone with a member of the opposite sex by himself. And the reason why he would do that is because he knew that he would never have sex with someone of the opposite gender who wasn't his wife if he wasn't alone with them, right? Like if you go out to a cafe and you're meeting up with a person that you're not supposed to be meeting up with of the opposite gender, are you going to have sex at a cafe? No, you're not. Like that's just not going to happen, right? So it's the Billy Graham rule. It's famous after him, but it's a very good rule that you can adopt in your own life once you get married as well. You and I are not called to have those sorts of relationships in the context of marriage where you're super friendly with someone of the opposite gender, because guess what can happen? It's very easy to fall into adultery. It is. The man after God's own heart, David, fell into adultery. And I'm sorry, but you don't have that title, man after God's own heart. And yet David did, right? How much more careful do you and I need to be? I'll give you 2 more. Number 9, don't idolize your marriage or your partner, but worship Jesus through your marriage instead. Here's what I mean by this. Some people really put on a pedestal their potential spouse. And they think once they get married, they are going to have that fairy tale marriage where they will live happily ever after. And they're like, oh, it will be great. My life will only be good from here on out. I'll have no troubles. I'll have no problems. And what they don't realize is that marriage is really the start of all those things. It's like opening Pandora's box. Oh. But that's how people idolize marriage in their head. They're like, once I get with this person, life will be perfect. There's only one person that makes life perfect, and that's Jesus. That's literally Jesus. Anyone else does not make life perfect. Okay? So don't put in your head that once you find that husband, once you find that wife, once you find that girlfriend, once you find that boyfriend, everything will be good. Because that's not how it works. Being in a relationship or being in a marriage is where 2 sinners come together. That's really, really tough. That's really, really challenging. It just is. So if you kind of lower your expectations, things will be easier. You know what I'm saying? You ever have somebody hype something up before, and then you go and eat that food or check out that place or the thing that they said to do, and then you were severely disappointed, and you thought to yourself, dude, like, this is it? Like, this is what you were hyping up? Like, you got mad at that friend, right? So let me do the same thing when it comes to marriage for you right now and kind of burst your bubble, so to speak. Marriage is great, but it's not going to be this all-fulfilling thing where you finally find that peace, that joy, that happiness, that fulfillment that you're looking for that can only be found in Jesus Christ. You're not. You're not. Okay? At the end of the day, marriage is for the glory of God. At the end of the day, your identity does not come from being a husband or a wife, boyfriend or girlfriend. It comes from being in Christ. It does. So if you kind of lower your expectations, I'll tell you, marriage will go a whole lot easier. It just will. And last thing, wives should learn to respect, submit to, and help your husbands in a way the church submits and respects Jesus. And husbands are to love, be tender towards, lead, and lay down your lives in selfishness for your wife in the same way Christ loves the church and gave himself up for her. In Ephesians 5:20-25, it says this: Wives, submit to your own husbands as to the Lord, for the husband is the head of the wife, even as Christ is the head of the church, his body, and is himself its Savior. Now, as the church submits to Christ, so also wives should submit in everything to their husbands. Husbands, love your wives as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her. I mean, does that sound like toxic masculinity? Where it's like, oh, like husbands like abuse or beat your wives or treat them poorly? No. Treat your wives in the same way that Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her. That's the way that you and I are supposed to do it. So last thing that we'll talk about is the theology of celibacy. This is found in verse 10 to 14. It says, the disciples are funny, man, because after they hear about like divorce and stuff, you know what they say? In verse 10, they're like, if such is the case of man with his wife, it is better not to marry. And then Jesus responds, not everyone can receive this saying, but only to those whom it is given. For there are eunuchs who have been so from birth, and there are eunuchs who have been made eunuchs by men, and there are eunuchs who have made themselves eunuchs for the sake of the kingdom of heaven. Let the one who is able to receive this, receive it. So, a couple things happening here. First, I want you to see that Jesus and Paul were both single and celibate and lived a fruitful and full and happy life to the glory of God. Right? Did Jesus ever get married? No, he did not. Did Paul ever get married? No, he did not. Were they fruitful and were they full and happy with life and joyful, and did they live to the glory of God? Yes, they did. In our culture today, we tend to kind of demonize celibacy and think that it's an awful and dreadful thing, and that being married equals more fruitfulness, and it's much better to be married as a whole or to be in a relationship. Jesus and Paul were both celibate. They never had a wife. They never had children, yet they lived insanely fruitful and Holy Spirit-filled lives that blessed many people. So don't think that just because you're single right now, or maybe you're called to celibacy in the future, that somehow you are something lesser. That's not true. Here, Jesus and Paul both advocated for celibacy. In verse 12, he says, there are eunuchs who have made themselves eunuchs for the sake of the kingdom of heaven. What does that mean? Should we start chopping off body parts? Is that what Jesus is saying? No. He's saying there are some people who behave like eunuchs, as in they are celibate and don't get together with people of the opposite sex for the kingdom of heaven. In the same way, in 1 Corinthians 7, 25-35, Paul says, concerning the betrothed, I have no command from the Lord, but I give my judgment as one who by the Lord's mercy is trustworthy. I think that in view of this present distress, it is good for a person to remain as he is. Are you bound to a wife? Do not seek to be free. Are you free from a wife? Do not seek a wife. But if you do marry, you have not sinned, and if a betrothed woman marries, she has not sinned. Yet those who marry will have worldly troubles, and I would spare you that. This is what I mean, brothers. The appointed time has grown very short. From now on, let those who have wives live as though they had none, and those who mourn as though they were not mourning, and those who rejoice as they were not rejoicing, and those who buy as though they had no goods, and those who deal with the world as though they had no dealings with it. For the present form of this world is passing away. I want you to be free from anxieties. The unmarried man is anxious about things of the Lord, how to please the Lord, but the married man is anxious about worldly things, how to please his wife, and his interests are divided. And the unmarried or betrothed woman is anxious about the things of the Lord, how to be holy in body and spirit. But the married woman is anxious about worldly things, how to please her husband. I say this for your own benefit, not to lay any restraint upon you, but to promote good order and to secure your undivided devotion to the Lord. So here's what Paul is saying, long story short. How many of you guys think that it's really, really hard to eat out these days? Like, it's expensive. Like, you go out and you're like, dude, it's pricey. Like, some of you guys have jobs and you're finally understanding like how much money is, and you're like, dude, it's pricey. Okay, so here's the thing. Imagine if that bill was doubled every single time, or sometimes even tripled. That's what Paul is talking about when he's talking about marriage. Your bill automatically becomes doubled or tripled because you're married. That's what happens. It takes not only food and drink, but it's double the amount of shelter. It's caring for the emotional, physical, spiritual, psychological, mental, relational needs of another person, and your attention is divided. Some of you here would have difficulty even taking care of a goldfish, right? Like, you'd forget to feed the goldfish one day and it just died. How many of you guys think you'd have difficulty feeding another person for the rest of your life until death? Like, yeah, that'd be hard.
Oops, I forgot.
Right? And Paul says further in 1 Corinthians 7, your attention would be divided. Like, if you're a married man or if you're a married woman and you have children, let's say, do you have a lot of things that you need to worry about? Yeah. That's more mouths to feed. That's more backs to put clothes on. That's more people to make sure that they're happy. So the benefit of singlehood is that who do you have to care for? Just yourself. It's really easy. Sounds like a really nice life, right? That's why Jesus and Paul both say, hey, it's a decent thing. But here's what Jesus says, right? And here's what Paul says. Not everyone can receive this saying, but only to those whom it is given. Let the one who is able to receive this receive it. Are all able to be celibate? No, they're not. Should we consider it though? Yeah, we should. Yeah, we should. Marriage and celibacy are both good things. In Proverbs 18:22, Proverbs says, "He who finds a wife finds a good thing and obtains favor from the Lord." It's a good thing to have a wife. Nothing wrong with it. 1 Corinthians 7:8-9, to the unmarried man, the widows, I say that it is good for them to remain single as I am, but if they cannot exercise self-control, they should marry, for it is better to marry than to burn with passion. So hey, listen, you got a lot of passion, you got a lot of testosterone, cool, get married. It's all good. Like, it's part of God's design. That's what marriage is for, right? It's good. There's nothing wrong with it whatsoever. So this word on celibacy is not for everybody, but some should consider it. If you want to be more devoted to Jesus and for the sake of the kingdom of heaven, it's something that you should consider. So we don't demonize people who aren't married or aren't in a relationship. We don't think that they're any lesser here, and we shouldn't. And at the same time, we don't demonize marriage either. There's some people who demonize marriage or even forbid marriage, saying, oh, dude, if you're really holy, you just wouldn't get married. Like, we don't think in those terms. Here we see both marriage and celibacy are a calling, and both are good callings altogether. So, all right, let's go and pray, and we'll respond in a song of worship, and we'll go to small groups after this.